Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking time today to join our workplace bullying webinar. We hope you find this hour very informative. Our presentation today will take about 45 minutes, and we're going to follow that with a 10 or 15-minute Q&A with our presenter. We wholeheartedly encourage you to submit questions during the presentation and welcome them. You can use the chat or question option in your GoToWebinar panel on the right-hand side of your screen to submit anything during the presentation. And that also is true if you're having any technical issues or you need assistance, we're happy to help you while Catherine is speaking. Today's presentation will be given by Catherine Williams. She's the author and publisher of Workplace Bullying, A Survival Guide. Catherine and her book have been featured on TV and radio and in newspapers all across Canada. During her 38 years in the workforce, Catherine resisted and survived multiple attacks by bullies, each time growing more knowledgeable about the techniques that bullies use, the conditions in which they thrive, and how to resist them. A former speechwriter and communications specialist, she took early retirement from the Public Service of Canada to focus her efforts on educating people around this phenomenon and giving them tools to use immediately to start protecting their safety in the workplace. So welcome everyone, and welcome Catherine.
Thank you very much, Erin. As you mentioned, I was in the workplace for 38 years, and I estimate that I was attacked at least 4 times, major attacks, and went through several minor attacks as well. But like most people, I assumed that bullying was just one of those hazards of the job, you know, one of those things. You have nice bosses, nice coworkers, or nasty coworkers. But a few years ago, I was given the job of doing a little one-page report on what is harassment. And in the course of doing the research for this, I had some very eye-opening experiences. Among other things, I discovered that in 1980, a researcher, a psychologist named Heinz Lehmann, was really the first person to study the phenomenon of workplace bullying. And he identified it as a systematic and widespread form of social dysfunction. Or to put it another way, bullying is not just one of those things. It's an identified form of interpersonal violence. Now, people often ask, what is the difference between harassment and bullying? Well, harassment is an attack on an individual's civil rights. Harassment can, for example, be a sexually inappropriate remark. It could be a racist comment. Broadly speaking, in the United States, it offends against state and federal civil rights legislation. In Canada, it offends against the Canadian Human Rights Act. Harassment is illegal, but with few exceptions, workplace bullying is actually legal in most jurisdictions. This citation comes from the Workplace Bullying Institute's website. I encourage you to visit it. The WBI is an anti-bullying organization located in Bellingham, Washington. And according to their research, illegal discriminatory harassment occurs in only 20% of bullying cases, which of course means that the remaining 80% of cases of bullying are legal. So what then actually is bullying? Workplace bullying is an attack on competence. Bullies feel threatened by competent people and try to drive them away, literally drive them out of their jobs. It's usually a psychological and emotional attack for the simple reason that if you punch someone out in the workplace, you're likely to get caught. But emotional and psychological bullying, whether at work or home or school, is largely invisible. There are no bruises to see. As we'll find out in a moment, it's the behavior of people who are either deeply insecure or who have a very serious cognitive disorder. Now, the bully's goal, of course, is to force a competent rival out of the workplace. Most people assume that bullying is top-down. It's manager or supervisor versus employee. But in fact, while managers and supervisors are more likely to bully, it is not at all uncommon for an employee to try to bully and undermine a supervisor or manager. Bullying can be from the top down, from the bottom up, or side to side, like manager versus manager. In all cases, the bully sees the target's competence as a personal threat. Bullying often slips below the radar because it becomes so pervasive in an organization that people assume it's normal. That's just how it's done. That's our corporate culture. That's how it's done everywhere. These are all excuses you may hear. You can be sure that the bullies are behind these excuses. But it's very important to understand that bullying is not normal workplace stress. As a form of violence, its sole purpose is to cause harm. This fact is, at long last, achieving recognition by governments. I'm quite proud of the fact that it was a Canadian province that was the first jurisdiction to put into effect anti-psychological harassment legislation. I believe that there are some places in Europe that have done the same thing. The Canadian provinces of Saskatchewan and Ontario have followed suit. In the United States, 25 states since 2003 have introduced the Healthy Workplace Bill, which is an initiative, I believe, of the Workplace Bullying Institute. However, although I think 16 of these bills are still active, as yet there has been none enacted. But people might argue, well, how bad is it really? How bad is it? The workplace is tough, shouldn't you just suck it up and get on with it? Well, in 2007 and 2010, the WBI carried out national surveys of the US workforce. And to date, as far as I'm aware, these surveys are the most comprehensive source relating to this issue. Here's some of their key findings. 35% of workers experiencing bullying firsthand. Majority are men. Majority of targets are women. Women bullies target women in 80% of the cases. It's been my own personal experience that women bullies tend to be the more dangerous. And I'll get into that in a minute. It's interesting why. Okay. And as you can see, majority is same-gender harassment, and on and on. So what then distinguishes bullying from harassment? Well, first of all, harassment, as I mentioned, can be one act. It could be many. But bullying is a pattern of behavior, and it can go on for years. Characteristically, bullying behavior is repeated again and again. Once you get to recognize the pattern, then it becomes fairly easy to identify bullies. But learning to recognize that pattern, what gamblers call tells that give away this pattern of behavior, that takes a little experience. It's usually started by one person who co-opts others. It's seldom an issue of one-on-one. This co-opting of behavior is one of the most corrosive things about workplace bullying. Normal people with usually high standards who would never set out to harm somebody else, can be very gradually dragged in and encouraged to commit acts that normally they would be horrified by. But due to bullying, they come to feel that their behavior is correct. Okay. Bullying certainly undermines morale. Trust is the social glue of society, and it's destroyed in bullying. In a toxic organization, no one can trust anyone. Everyone is asking the same question, are you going to turn on me next? There are serious health problems. Many are physical, and we'll see some of those later on. It causes psychiatric injury. Many of you may be aware that this is not the same as mental illness. A psychiatric injury could be something like hypervigilance, where a person feels, they are out to get me. They're sure that they are out to get me. Other people will say, oh, you're paranoid, you're nuts, you're out of touch. But in reality, a person under attack in the workplace will be picking up very subtle hints that something is wrong. The behavior is changing. They feel that they are under attack, but they can't put their finger on it. They can't say what it is. Someone who's truly paranoid, on the other hand, is completely, out of touch with reality. It can definitely lead to suicide or violence. People who are being bullied become extremely isolated. Violence is from the bully is much less likely to happen, but it does happen. In my own city, which is Ottawa, in 1999, a man who was bullied at work came back one day with a gun and shot the 4 people who were bullying him. That's an unusual case, but it certainly can happen. And yes, it could destroy an organization. A couple of examples might be Enron or Barclays Bank in England. It's a very curious fact about workplace bullies that they never worry that their behavior could harm their own livelihoods. Failure is always somebody else's fault. So now, who are the people who get bullied? Well, as I said, it's competent people. But until I started doing my own research, I assumed, and I think a lot of people would agree, that, oh, these are the timid people, the ones who don't speak up for themselves, etc. But in fact, the opposite is generally the case. Competent, dedicated, well-liked people are usually the organization's best people. In the workplace and other social settings like schools, bullies will target the people they fear or envy. Competent people usually have strong work ethics, and they have integrity. They're dedicated to the organization. They want to do their best. Bullies, on the other hand, are obsessed with strength, with looking and feeling strong. Every bully I've ever encountered, and I've encountered quite a few, seem to interpret strength as being the ability to cause pain, to hurt other people. They believe that good nature is a sign of a weak, placating person. But in fact, it's the opposite. People who are good-natured don't need to hurt and humiliate others in order to feel strong. They have integrity, maturity, and self-confidence. And these are qualities that bullies lack, and boy, do they hate people who have them. Bullies will often target young people just entering the workforce to prevent them from developing competence and becoming a threat. They will also attempt to use young people as helpers. Contractors, consultants, very vulnerable to bullying because they often have no job security other than the goodwill of the employer. And I think it's self-explanatory. Women over 40 do get bullied quite a lot. And who are these awful people? Who are the bullies? Well, I used to think of them as, oh, they're just losers and loners, but in fact, they're often very charming, affable, likable people. They study how to make themselves liked. Their ability to ingratiate themselves can make it really difficult for a bullied coworker to convince others that this charming, agreeable person is really a monster. It's especially difficult as a bullied person will be suffering from extreme stress, and as a result can come across as, unstable, erratic, emotional, the very opposite of the apparently rational and pleasant bully. Bullies, yes, definitely insecure people with little or no empathy, the fellow feeling, the ability to understand what another person is thinking and feeling. And power fix, absolutely. Threatened by competence, we've gone over that. The WBI says that they're more likely to be men than women, but I have some disagreement with that because I think women slide under the radar. The techniques of bullying, as carried out by men and women, are quite different. Men will more likely use their place in the hierarchy, their position and their title. A man might shout at a meeting, thump his fist on the table. He'd be very in your face. Women, on the other hand, are likely to use their social networks and connections, the grapevine, the gossip in the hallway, in the ladies' room. They're very subtle about it, and they're usually subtle with a smile. They use language to attack someone else. It can be very difficult to identify a woman bully because she's not going to be out front shouting. She will start that dangerous whispering campaign that will be going over very shortly. Bullying can be learned. Someone might have had an abusive family life, or their early formative work environment might be one that's very abusive. And they come up to the point of thinking that this is just natural, this is normal, this is how it's done. It's really characteristic of them that they feel that they are the normal people. And if someone brings a complaint against them, they're hurt. They're hurt. The person who is bringing the complaint must be the real bully. People who come from an abusive background are normal people, but they're damaged. They've been injured. Others, by far the more dangerous, have a pathological disorder. And these people do understand very well how their words and actions affect other people. Now, this is kind of an umbrella category. There are other related disorders that include histrionic behavior disorder, borderline personality disorder. But it only takes demonstrating 3 of these behaviors for a doctor to diagnose someone as having antisocial personality disorder. Now, it used to be thought that only about 4 out of 1,000 people had APD, but current thinking sets the ratio very much higher, at as many as 4 out of 100 people. Visibility is probably a factor. If someone commits a murder or destroys a large company like Barclays Bank, it's highly visible. But most workplace bullying just slides under the radar. The cause of APD is not yet known, but researchers do know that genetics and biology play key roles, influenced by upbringing. And I know there's a lot of debate going on right now in the research community about the relative weights of these different factors. Some say it's more genetics, some say it's more upbringing. It's still under examination. But thanks to magnetic resonance imaging studies, researchers also know that there is a difference between the brains of normal people and those who have APD. And the area most affected is in the forebrain. It's two little clusters of neurons called the amygdalas. And these are responsible for processing emotions. In the case of people with APD, for an as yet unknown reason, they don't switch on. Just to give you an analogy, imagine having perfectly normal eyes, but no optic nerves. Light would come in and go nowhere. In the case of people with APD, social lessons come in and they go nowhere. We learn what our society considers to be appropriate social behavior from our parents, teachers, the community at large. People who have APD just do not absorb these lessons. There's also strong evidence that people with APD process language differently from normal people. And this helps account for their frequent and very fluent lying. Words that have emotional impacts like I love you or you can trust me have no emotional meaning for them whatsoever. But they do know, they do understand the impact that these words have on normal people. Men and women equally likely to have APD. The terms used, common terms, sociopath or psychopath. And again, it seems to be a matter of preference whether you use sociopath or psychopath. Some researchers go to one, some go to the other. I tend to prefer to use the word sociopath because I'm talking about workplaces. So workplaces is social organizations. So in the rest of this presentation, you'll see me use sociopath. They certainly don't want to be treated. They think they are far superior to normal people. In the public mind also, psychopaths are often associated with extreme physical violence, but it's not actually the case. That there's a scale of 1 to 10 called the Harassment checklist. And 10, yes, that's your serial murderer, but 1 might be just, an ordinary kid who's not violent, he's a bit different. Psychopath or sociopath, they do have one common denominator. Absolutely no sense of conscience. Because they cannot absorb social lessons, they do not learn to love, to feel guilt or shame, to accept responsibility, and they never learn from experience. I happened to hear a couple of years ago an interview with the psychiatrist in Britain, and he had been administering tests for psychopathic behavior, and on a whim he decided to take the test himself, and lo and behold, he was a psychopath, which was a great shock to him. But he said he was raised in a loving, warm family. He had no reason to commit violence. He never hurt people. He was interested in helping people and became a psychiatrist. But when he told his family, they said, we knew there was something different about you. And what it was his risk-taking behavior. And psychopaths or sociopaths seem to have an inability to comprehend danger to themselves. And one of these tells that might indicate that you're dealing with someone who has this condition would be that they could get involved in risky sports and get hurt, and when they're healed, go back and do it again, and get hurt and go back and do it again. Each time it will be, they'll have an excuse. It won't happen to me again, or it's somebody else's fault, or the equipment failed. But they don't absorb the lessons from experience. And in the workplace, I've dealt with bullies who have been disciplined for their bad behavior, and they stop the individual behavior, but they keep on bullying. They don't learn that bullying itself is going to get them into trouble. Other signs of sociopathic behavior: grandiose egos, the entitlement princesses, the little emperors. They really do believe that the world is all about themselves. And one author, I think it was psychologist Martha Stout, described them as feeling like movie stars. And everyone else in the movie is a bit player. And the movie is about themselves. Sociopaths, like all bullies, are experts at manipulating other people to do their dirty work. such as sabotaging a targeted employee's job. It can be really difficult in a workplace bullying situation to pin down who exactly is the person responsible, because that person will have apparently clean hands. They become very good at maneuvering other people into helping them. In one case I was personally involved in, I was the target. The manager who was bullying me had a friend who thought the world of her. And this friend was led to believe that I was trying to get the manager's job, which I was not trying to do. And she saw herself as the white knight defending her chum. And she would come and sabotage my work and pass gossip around about me that was very negative. In her mind, she was not doing something cruel and ugly. She was doing something noble and righteous. This is the kind of manipulation that can go on. One of their key identifying tells is their very great charm. People who are bullies, or psychopathic bullies, or sociopathic bullies in particular, really can turn it on. They're consummate actors. They can play roles and assume personas. And in the workplace, that they will often come across as dynamic, intelligent people who would make great managers. This persona will last only until they have the power they want. And I've seen this again and again. Someone you would have wanted to work with, thought, this guy's great. As soon as he's got the job or she's got the job, they just drop that mask. I don't know if any of you have been in the presence of a sociopath who actually drops the mask, and it can be quite terrifying because instantly there's somebody else, somebody you don't know. And normal people, people who have consciences, always seek rational reasons to explain the behavior of other people. When a bully behaves in a strange and very frightening way, the targeted person will usually assume that in the absence of a rational reason for the bully's aggression, they themselves must be doing something wrong. I remember one occasion where a sociopathic manager dropped the mask in front of me, and I sat there thinking, what did I do? Did I look at him funny when I walked in the door? Is there something about the way I'm dressed? How have I offended him? As a result, the employee will keep on trying harder to please and to calm down the bully. But this only aggravates the attack, because the more competence the target shows, the more threatened the bully feels. The more you try to show that you really are a good employee or a good colleague, the more the bully will attack. A sociopathic bully cannot be calmed down. The bully's behavior is intended to dominate and control. The bully does not want to calm down. The situation will continue to be irrational, which certainly adds to the target's distress. And what techniques do they use? Well, in the office or the workplace, it's mostly verbal. As I said earlier, you can't punch somebody out or you slap them around, you will be caught. The pattern of bullying behavior is the same whether the bully is a sociopath or a normal but damaged person. In the workplace, a sociopath's sole aim is to get power and use it. And this is true to a lesser extent for normal people who bully out of fear or because they've learned to bully. They crave control also, but for quite different reason. They're looking for security. I worked with one woman who had a father who was an abusive alcoholic and a mother who was passive-aggressive. And to her, this woman, the more power she had in the workplace, the safer she felt. She wasn't a cruel person, but she was a very frightened person. It is possible, though difficult, to negotiate with a person like that, with someone who has learned to bully. It is not possible to negotiate with a sociopath. They will never admit to wrongdoing. Even if caught in the act and disciplined, they will continue to bully. They just change how they do it. The technique called mobbing, which is identified by psychologist Heinz Lehmann, is the single most important and dangerous bully tactic. It's the cause of immense suffering, as well as the destruction of livelihoods, and it can destroy organizations as well. So what is mobbing? This is pretty general, but what it comes down to is that in a mobbing attack, a bully will manipulate coworkers into attacking a targeted employee. The attack is subtle, persistent, and once launched, it's very difficult to stop. Other terms you might have heard are groupthink or like whisper campaign. Characteristically, mobbing starts small and grows fast. A psychologist once told me that we humans have an innate terror of being expelled from our social group. For most of our history, we were nomads, we were hunters and gatherers, and it was our ability to organize in social groups to find food and defend ourselves is what made us successful as a species. But back in the ancient days, if you were thrown out of your social group, you'd probably die. We spontaneously, and perhaps instinctively, cooperate to oppose a perceived threat to the group. That's a good trait when you're ganging up on a hungry lion, but in a mobbing attack, a bully will try to make an innocent person appear to be a threat, in this case, to the social group called the workplace, and drive them out. And it is surprisingly easy to do. The creation of doubt is the core of a mobbing attack. A whisper campaign, a word here in this ear, a word here and that here. A very slow, insidious introduction of doubt. Some of the actual behaviors that can indicate a mobbing attack is going on are a cold shoulder, taunting, ridicule. This is a short list. But research has shown that insults, verbal insults, have the same chemical reactions in the brain as physical assault. Stress rises, heartbeats increase, blood pressure shoots up. What makes a mobbing attack so very devastating is that it never stops. Every social encounter becomes an attack. And after a while, fear of more attacks adds still more stress. And all the while, the target doesn't know why it's happening, why people who were once friendly are now turning hostile. I have been through mobbing attacks, and it could become impossible to go to sleep at night because I knew in the morning I was going to go back into that situation and I would be attacked. I didn't know why. Stress will change the attacked person's behavior. Angry outbursts, crying. It used to be called burnout when people went through this. Of course, the work quality deteriorates because you come to work spending all your time defending yourself instead of focusing on your job. And again, people who have consciences tend to blame themselves, not other people. I must be doing something wrong. As a bully person's behavior becomes more erratic, more visibly stressed, co-workers start feeling justified in their hostility. The bullied person now appears to be abnormal and predictable, a threat to the group. Targets can become isolated from their families. People can come home from a terribly stressful day at work and the spouse says, "How was your day?" and they snarl, "What do you care?" Oh, well, if you're going to be like that. In my personal experience, my greatest resource was my family. Both my parents had been through bullying and they understood what was going on. Targets will cling to the job. The goal of mobbing and bullying is to drive the target away. But under attack for unknown reasons from people who were once trusted, the target clings to the familiar job. You were successful in the job. You were praised. You were rewarded. You might love the job. You cling to it. Stress-related injuries and illnesses become so severe that it's possible that people can become incapable of working, so totally burned out that they simply cannot face the working environment again. Mobbing can lead to strokes, heart attacks, suicide, or as I mentioned earlier, retaliatory violence. Conditions for mobbing. This basically is, it comes down to poor management, not realizing what is going on. Probably one of the ones that I experienced most closely was the unionized workplace, avoiding conflict of interest. I was a member of my union executive before I retired, and unions just dread having two opposed members. Legally, if you pay dues to your union is obliged to represent you, and this can create a tremendously stressful situation when you've got two people, two opposed members, going at it. In a mobbing attack, there are no innocent bystanders. All of us in the workplace are at risk of being manipulated into helping a bully because it's so subtle, because it's insidious. Little by little, our behavior is changed. We don't see it happening. We've come to feel that we are the righteous people. The really awful irony about mobbing is that bullies, who are lifelong misfits and outsiders, use our greatest strength, our social organization, against us. In particular, our fear of becoming contaminated by association with a targeted individual contributes both to the suffering of that innocent person and to the bully's power to widen the assault. The silence of bystanders and of targets empowers bullies. Yet, by speaking up and sharing information and comparing stories, these are essential defenses against bullying. Now, what signs and symptoms are there that bullying is going on in the organization? Well, first of all, it's corporate signs. Drop in productivity is a very important one. Although productivity might actually go up after a new manager or supervisor is hired. And that's because employees might overachieve to impress the new boss. But, again, the bully will feel threatened by competent employees and will seek to render them harmless by destroying their ability to produce or drive them out of their jobs. Bullies will also try to bring in their own sycophants, their helpers, the people they know they can dominate and control. The bully covers up by lying, blame throwing, applying greater pressure on the remaining employees, which of course increases their stress and reduces their effectiveness. They're really, really good at coming up with excuses that put the blame on other people. Some other corporate signs. This is a biggie. Financial mismanagement. I said earlier that the key sign or symptom of a workplace bully is patterned behavior. In the case of financial mismanagement, one instance of overspending could simply be a mistake or a lack of training or lack of experience. But when mismanagement occurs 2 or 3 times, you could be dealing with a bully, a sociopath, or a normal person, because they both follow this pattern. I had the experience in my last job of working with a woman who was determined to get rid of me, and I was a speechwriter, and she thought, well, if I can contract out all the speech writing, then I can say that we don't need Catherine's job, therefore we don't need Catherine. So she contracted out all the speech writing requirements. And I had the pleasure of being there the day the head financial officer came down and ripped a strip off of her because she'd gone wildly, wildly over budget. Spending money to a sociopath is a power trip. And they really don't seem to understand money, that money has to be accounted for. It seems to be part of that enormous sense of entitlement. Money is supposed to be there. They don't feel accountable to anyone for their actions. They don't feel accountable to the organization that employs them. When a workplace bully walks in the door in the morning, they're not there to achieve the employer's goals. They're not there even to make a livelihood. They come to work to get power and abuse it. More corporate signs, pointless reorganizations. Bullies absolutely thrive in fog. When no one is certain what's happening or who is in charge, this is heaven to a sociopath. They'll try to maintain this state of corporate confusion as long as possible. The other points, complaints, grievances, lawsuits, job actions, again, are signs of something going very badly wrong. What kind of behavior do bullies demonstrate? I think this is a pretty self-explanatory list. Constant false finding, overloading with work, denying information resources. When these are repeated constantly in that pattern of behavior, then you have a sign that there is a bully doing what they do, loving it. They just love doing this. The shouting, the insults, the ridicule. It is why they come to work. What does this do to the people who are attacked? Again, this is a short list. Humans are adapted to cope with some stress, but we are not designed to handle stress over an extended period. In a mobbing attack, the stress never ends. Every encounter eventually becomes an attack. Brain and body are intimately linked. Mental stress has physiological effects like high blood pressure and tensed muscles. During one bullying attack I survived, I became so tense. My shoulders knotted up so much I was twisted to the side and I couldn't straighten up. Many people who experience this kind of violence suffer also from post-traumatic stress disorder at the same level as soldiers returning from combat. And that's kind of shocking because the soldiers in combat may see terrible things, but the same level of stress is experienced by people who are under attack in the workplace. Psychological symptoms. Oh, bursts of anger. Yes, indeed. One day I was sitting in my office and my abusive manager had just come and lied to me about something, and I wasn't normally a violent person, but I picked up my stapler and I fired it across my office, smashing an award I'd won, which made not a very good day. But This irrational burst of anger sent me finally to seek help. I went to the employee assistance program at my organization, and they were indeed very helpful to me. Bullies will observe such changes and cite them as proof that the target is the cause of the problem. Look at her, she threw a stapler across the room. She's nuts. Well, how do you protect yourself? The greatest barrier a bullied person faces is denial, their own denial. For example, my boss's behavior can't possibly be irrational. I must have done something to cause it. Until the denial stage is over, it's not possible to fight back. It is absolutely essential for a bullied person to realize and accept that he or she is not the problem. After the denial hurdle is crossed, the next stage is anger, and this is where fighting back becomes possible. Families and doctors certainly help a person get through the denial stage, and so does knowledge. First thing I would advise people to do, and I followed these steps myself, was to build a case history. Write down what was said and done, names of witnesses, and keep these records at home. Bullies do not respect a targeted person's rights. For example, a bully will gladly search someone's purse or knapsack or briefcase if they think they can find some incriminating evidence. These are illegal acts. And if somebody does search personal property, the police should be called. It's not something that management should be asked to handle. Set boundaries. Private life really is private. It's your time. Bullying will always escalate. A bully, especially a sociopathic bully, will try to intrude into your personal life. There's just no limit how far in they'll go. They'll try to control your social relationships, your money, your time. Abusing personal data devices like cell phones is done to make you feel that you can never get away from the bully. I've had the experience of a bully calling me at 2 in the morning. I just had an idea I want to discuss with you. Oh yeah, really? What the bully is actually trying to do was make me feel that I could not get away from him. He could reach me anywhere. I said, I'll talk to you at work, and I hung up. He stopped that particular attack. He went on to others because he had not succeeded in controlling me in this manner. My advice to people who are getting calls like this is to either turn off your phone or hand it to a family member to answer. The bully will be enraged, but not because you're failing to do your job. The bully is enraged at not being able to get at and control someone through the data device. Bullies will always try to force the targets on the defensive and make them justify their lives and their beliefs. And there is really no limit to how deeply they'll go. What you believe in and how you live your life are your business and yours only. And finally, make your objections known. And this is really important. Speaking up. Bullies count on the targets, believing that they are the only ones who are suffering. But when there's a bully at work in an organization, there will be more than one person who's been attacked. I once brought a grievance against a manager and had a very interesting experience of people coming up to me and saying, I've got to do the same thing. How do I do it? Tell me what to do. This particular person was attacking many individuals. And each one thought that he or she was alone. Communicate? Absolutely. It's also important, however, to be discreet. I say trusted friends or colleagues in this, but really I mean people who are not in your own work environment. Because in a mobbing attack, you just do not know who has been co-opted or what techniques from bribery to coercion to charm to sexual favors have been used to get someone on the bully's side as a helper. Doctors and family, oh, absolutely. My parents were the best help I could have had. In one situation, they were even willing to put their house on the market to pay for legal fees. That situation was resolved in my favor, and luckily they didn't have to do that. But that was love. They were willing to go that far to help me. Don't be intimidated by threats. Sometimes a bully will scream, "Don't you dare go over my head," or "Don't go behind my back." What the bully is really saying is, don't say or do something that could cause me to lose my power over you. A confident and capable manager never needs to say such a thing. Bullies, especially sociopaths, do not fear discipline because they simply don't believe it will happen to them. What they fear is loss of control. And finally, the Employee Assistance Program. Now, I've been to it several times. I've had people come up to me and say, oh, you can't trust them. You know, they're hired by the employer. They tattle. Well, my experience is that no, they do not tattle. They are professional people. They have the interest of their own client, the employee who comes to them, at heart. And I always pass on this message that yes, you can talk to them and yes, you can trust them. Mind your health. I cannot understate how dangerous a bully attack can be to health. Severe and prolonged stress can kill. And people who are under stress often withdraw into themselves, which is the worst thing they can do. One of the nastiest of all bully tricks is to accuse the target of being mentally ill, and therefore to blame for the problems. Your behavior is irrational. You're nuts. A manager did this to me once, pointed his finger at me and said, you need psychiatric help. My response to him was, please show me your medical degree. Only a doctor can make a diagnosis of mental illness. Well, he wasn't expecting that reply, and it really threw him. And that was in the middle of a nasty battle. That was a moment of small victory for me. A bully is greatly helped by the sense of confusion that a mobbing attack creates. People will doubt themselves. People will think, maybe I am mad. I mentioned hypervigilance earlier, which resembles paranoia. A psychologist or psychiatrist really can be your best ally. They can see what is really happening and that someone is trying to make it impossible for you to continue working. And because people do tend to withdraw into themselves, it requires an effort sometimes to keep that social network active, but it's absolutely important to keep up the normal social relationships with friends and family. Then know your rights. What are your collective agreements? What are the state and federal civil rights legislation? What are your organization's policies? I can say that I don't really feel comfortable if someone that came up to me and said, well, what are your rights under the laws of Ontario where you live? And I could probably wing it. But I could not, with the exception of a couple acts, like the one act that Ontario brought to protect psychological harassment, I couldn't really say what my civil rights are in detail. I know they're there. The organization's policies, what are they? Do they have policies? If they haven't got policies, maybe one should take steps to start initiating them. Applying rights can be a challenge, though, because you're likely to run into opposition. The bully is to an extent protected by the people who hired him or her. Their judgment is being called into question if the bully is accused of attacking another employee. However, sociopaths and even normal bullies are expert liars. If a manager has followed the correct procedures, hiring procedures, then there should be no feeling of shame. They've been fooled. They've been deceived. Know the risks to others. There could often be more than one target, but there is safety in numbers. If several people start taking notes and building case histories, it strengthens everyone's position. Know where to find help. These are all excellent resources. Bully Online is what was one of the first websites, and it's still, I think, one of the best. Do research. Just learn what is available out there. Use your allies. Again, family, probably one of the best allies you could have. And last but not least, look for another job. When a bully attacks, we want to defend our jobs and reputations. It's really difficult to let go of a job, especially if it's a job you love and have been successful in. But it's also the safest option. Once a bully is in an organization, that bully is likely to be there for a long time, simply because they are being protected. If you do choose to stay and fight, always keep this option open. Believe me, it hurts less to leave a toxic job than it hurts to stay and endure what a bully, especially a sociopathic bully, can and will do. The effects of bullying are cumulative. They always get worse. If you leave on your own terms, you win. The bully wants to destroy your competence, your ability to keep on working. The people who fail to stop the bully will be the ones who have to cope with the consequences of their failure to help you. Why should an organization that fails to protect its employees keep the competence? take your competence and go somewhere else. And that is the end of my presentation for today. Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to speak to you.
Thank you so much, Catherine. That was excellent. And I have a few questions that came in from our participants. Thank you all so much. And feel free while Catherine and I are going through these to submit others if they come up. That would be great. Okay, Catherine, I'm going to go through the set of questions we have here and pull out a couple that I think are great. The first is about, from the top of your talk, about how much of bullying is legal, the 80% of it's legal. She asks, if 80% of bullying is legal, are there any real legal consequences since most bullies don't break the law?
Legal consequences tend to boil up in lawsuits. For example, I know in Canada, at least, there is a very broad legislation about conspiring to deprive someone of their gainful employment. People will go to court on grounds such as that, but it's very stressful, very hard to prove. Lawsuits are enormously hard to cope with because you're spending a great deal of money, which you may not have if you had to leave the job. You have to fight an organization. The consequences can be very hard. You might fail. In my very first bullying attack, I was about 23, 24 years old. And this is the one where my parents were willing to provide legal funding. That did come to a lawsuit. And we had an out-of-court settlement. The organization had no leg to stand on. I got the settlement I wanted, which was mostly, it was not money. It was a letter stating accurately what I had done. They didn't want to give me that because they wanted to pretend that I had been laid off due to incompetence. They were protecting the bully in the organization. When it's 80% legal, it is really difficult to pin a bully down because they are so good at dodging, ducking, and especially at putting the blame on other people. Now, I mentioned one woman who thought she was a white knight for a bully. She would come in and sabotage my work. She could have been dismissed for this. But for the bully, there would have been really no legal consequences. I hope this is the answer you're looking for. In other words, it's tough.
It sounds like it. Thank you, Catherine. Okay, another great question says, I like to think of myself as a thick-skinned person, but a group of coworkers tease me frequently. How do I know when it's more than teasing?
Thick-skinned person. Well, if people are teasing you frequently, first of all, I would try to just make a mental note of who is doing it. Is it one or two or three people who are doing it consistently? This is a possible indication that you're dealing with a bully and the bully's helpers. If it's general, it could be just part of office banter or workplace banter. It is, I know from talking to people in the employee assistance program, it can be difficult to draw the line between what is friendly banter intended to make you feel part of the group and hostile banter intended to drive you away from the group. I would make notes and listen to the words that are selected by these people. Are the words physically derogatory? Are the words language that, if used by yourself to another person, would make you feel ashamed? And how often does it happen? Is it happen on every social encounter? If it does, you might be experiencing a mobbing attack. Being thick-skinned doesn't mean you have no feelings. And if someone is really trying hard to, say, make you flinch, or make you get angry, then that, in my mind, would be an attack. If someone is trying to get an emotional answer from you that makes you look or feel bad. Personally, I like to think that I'm thick-skinned too, but my reaction now to bullies and remarks like that is to fire back. And if the person apologizes for the comment, then I feel that I'm dealing with someone who's just maybe a little socially inept. But if the person gets huffy, well, if you're going to be like that, then I'm suspicious of their motives.
That's great, Catherine. Thank you. I think that's wonderful advice. All right, one more here. The question asks, since you've personally experienced bullying, what would you recommend to help me moving on after having experienced bullying myself?
Well, when people do ask me that question, my first reply to them is know that you are not the problem. You have been under attack by somebody who is the problem. It's a really hard thing to get over that hurdle, to feel that you must have done something to bring this attack on. But in fact, no. Bullies are 100% of the problem when someone's attacked. How I moved on after that, well, I keep coming back to my family and the emotional support, which is so good. I saw a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist guided me through the emotions of anger and resentment and all the disturbing feelings that I was suffering. We talked them out, and that was successful. And I always reminded myself, I was attacked because I was good at what I did. I kept reminding myself of that. It became almost a mantra. I was good at what I did. I am good at what I do. And this recognition that the reason why I was attacked was because I was good really helped me recover. And it does take time. The first time I was attacked, I would say it took 3 years before I felt back to myself, my normal self. But I did recover. And keeping up, also other techniques, keep up your social, relationships, do things that you enjoy. It is so easy to withdraw. I found myself withdrawing when I was being attacked. I didn't go out to my clubs. I didn't play sports that I liked. I just sort of crawled into myself. But going back to doing that really was a boost. These are such normal things to do. Bullying itself is abnormal. It's a strange, almost surreal world that's created, an artificial world that's created by the bully. And you have to get out of that and get back to the real world where you are who you are, and you are a success. You are a good person.
All right, great. Thank you, Catherine. Another excellent question just popped in. She asked, what would you suggest if you feel that someone is spreading gossip or rumors about you? Is gossip considered bullying? And if so, what would you consider the benchmark before it becomes a legally defensible behavior under the relevant legislation?
Well, the benchmark would be a violation of the civil rights of the individual. Gossip it's one of those gray area things. The key thing is, who is going to hear it? And what will they say? When I was working, and I'm retired now, but when I was working, I got into the habit, I learned it early. My mother, in fact, said this to me. She said, never repeat something if it's not kind to another person. And I followed that advice. So if you repeat gossip that's favorable or kind, or, I hear John's daughter won a prize at school, isn't that great? That's the kind of gossip that I don't think anybody minds spreading. Gossip that is negative, that humiliates a person, that mocks someone even subtly. Look at that hairstyle. She could have a colony of bees in there, and she wouldn't even notice it. These are remarks that, although they seem a bit cruelly witty, are basically cruel. Spreading gossip. I'm a very social person. I just love to chat with people. But you do develop an ear after a while, once you know that you're in an organization that is perhaps toxic, for the kind of gossip that will do damage to people's reputations. And in my book, I do have a section on what is slander and libel. Slander being a verbal lie, libel being a written lie. And it is subtle, at least under Canadian law, which is the only law I'm familiar with. But I would suspect under American law too, it's very subtle. Does it harm this person's ability to earn their living? Does it harm livelihood? Does it make this person no longer trusted to handle money? These are some of the benchmarks that, again, under Canadian law, are used to determine if, broadly speaking, gossip is harmful to the person. It does come down to what right-thinking people feel about the individual. Again, I'm citing Canadian law, but I'm sure you can find a parallel. What do right-thinking people feel about the individual who's complaining that they have been defamed by gossip? And then it comes down to the court. And what the court considers to be defamatory can change over time. 100 years ago, it might have been extremely defamatory to say that woman smokes. She's obviously, of low character. Nowadays, if you say, well, my neighbor smokes, people will be totally uninterested. So what? Okay, she's harming her health, but that's her business. What is defamatory in the end is what a court decides is defamatory. Sounds a little vague, but they do have the benchmarks of has it harmed this person's livelihood? Has it affected this person's ability to take responsibility for managing money?
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Catherine. Yes, in the States, we do have a reasonable person standard and some similar parallels. Um, our hour is just about up, so I think we'll wrap up with that last excellent question. Catherine, thank you so much for your time and the wonderful and informative presentation. And thank you to all of the attendees for spending an hour with us. We really appreciate your attendance and your excellent questions. I hope you all have an excellent afternoon.
Thank you.